Okay, today we have Arizona Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
I guess we have to start with the most important thing here. Have the cyber ninjas found any bamboo fibers yet?
Not that I know of, but they're not going to either. So,
Yeah, the fact that I have to say that sentence out loud, and that's a real thing that's happening right now. How many recounts or audits are we on in Arizona right now?
I don't want to call this an audit, so I'm not counting this in the number. But after each election, each county does a post-election logic and accuracy test, which is an audit of the equipment, and then we do a hand count audit of a 2% of randomly selected precincts, and that is a ballot audit. And so those were all done in every county. And then over and above that, Maricopa County did an additional logic and accuracy test and two forensic audits of the equipment conducted by federally certified auditing firms who understand election equipment and know what they are looking for.
Right. So at this point, is it just a Republican effort to, until they can get the outcome that they're looking for, they'll just keep pushing forward these audits regardless of how insane or conspiratorial they are?
Well, honestly, I don't think they're going to get the result they're looking for unless they are cooking the books, which some of the procedures that we've seen have made it ripe for that to happen. But what they're really trying to do is continue to undermine the integrity of our elections and the public's confidence in them, and lay the groundwork for future election challenges. So it's very, as comical as it is to look at this, it is also very concerning as we look ahead to the next elections.
Right. I mean, building on that, I know that we do joke about cyber ninjas, but how is this allowed? Because, I mean, this is a group with no actual audit experience. The founder's a conspiracy theorist. One of the auditors was at the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. The auditors are using UV lights to check for secret watermarks. There are allegations that chickens ate the ballots and then the chickens were incinerated. So how is a blatantly partisan organization allowed to go near ballots? Because this is going to happen across the country now. And any partisan hack who's mainlining Tucker Carlson can start up an audit firm. They can call themselves Patriot Eagle Freedom Defenders and then say, yes, we've detected trace amounts of, Pizzagate fibers, and this election's all a scam, and 60% of Republicans are going to believe them. So how is this something that's allowed to happen outside of official channels?
Well, it started with the Republicans in the Senate issuing a subpoena, and this was really in response to their base, these people in their base who were demanding it. And Maricopa County initially wasn't going to comply with the subpoena because they felt, well, and they were getting legal counsel that said, you can't turn over this stuff. There's a whole bunch of bad precedent for doing so. And we think legally you can't do that anyway. They went to court and a judge upheld the validity of the subpoena and the Senate subpoena powers to do this. And so instead of appealing that ruling, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors complied with it. And so here we are. Even amid all of these concerns, they're going to now have to decertify that election equipment that they lost chain of custody of. The chain of custody of ballots has been completely destroyed. But there really is no legal parameter around this kind of situation. It's really outside of the statutes and the procedures that we have for elections. We shared all of the security procedures that should be in place with the Senate, and they ignored that. And so that's why we're seeing now there's not enough precaution in place to protect the integrity of all these things. But they're testing the waters here and writing the playbook to try to do it in other states.
That same Republican-controlled Maricopa County Board of Supervisors now seems pretty livid over this. They've released a letter saying our state has become a laughingstock. Worse, this audit is encouraging our citizens to distrust elections, which weakens our democratic republic. The Republican who serves as the recorder tweeted, "I'm literally looking at our voter registration database on my screen right now. Right now, we can't indulge these insane lies any longer as a party, as a state, as a country." And that was after the cyber ninjas accused the county of deleting a database that contained election information, which, of course, Trump picked up and tweeted out from his blog or however he reaches people now. So clearly that's backfired on them. But I guess the broader question here is there seems to be two camps of Republicans. We have one who, like these very Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, and then the other, which are, continuing to humor what we're seeing with groups like the Cyber Ninjas. So what percentage of the Republican Party would you say is in each camp?
I don't know the percentages, but what I will say, I think what we're seeing is a little bit of buyer's remorse, and folks who knew from the beginning that our election was valid and fair and the results we certified were accurate, but were hesitant to speak up because when they did, they got some pushback. When the Republican Board of Supervisors decided to fight this subpoena, they got some pushback, they got attacked, there were some threats. The same kind of thing that my office has been experiencing since the election. And so I think, there was some hesitancy there. And I think now, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but the actions they're taking, give a sense of some buyer's remorse. And I think what we need more of is those Republicans, especially Republicans who know that this is a farce, to speak up and say so, because if they all got up together and did it, it wouldn't be as scary. And I think it would certainly have more impact than individuals doing that.
Right. At the end of the day, it's going to need to be the Republicans who have to speak out, not just the Democrats, but it's not like Democrats have any clout in those circles anyway. More broadly, building on what you had mentioned earlier, we are seeing other states already engaging in similar behavior. In Wisconsin, the Republican State Assembly head just hired former police officers to do the same thing. This is not an audit firm, it's police officers, for a 2020 recount. And so in addition to not being qualified, there's also the added threat of force against communities who've become used to this kind of thing. So really the threat of violence not only isn't hiding, but it's getting more pronounced.
Right. Since the election, when there was this widespread disinformation coming from every direction, all these conspiracy theories, many of us were saying, this is dangerous, this is dangerous. And there are people who predicted what happened on January 6th, but I think nobody in their imagination actually expected to happen, but it did. That is exactly why we are saying this is dangerous. And that should have given us all pause and made this stop. And it clearly hasn't. And it's not off the table for something like that to happen again. In fact, there's a lot of people that are supporting this so-called audit who believe that it will actually overturn the election results. It's not going to. We know that. Most of the leaders of this effort know that, but they're pushing it anyway. And it is dangerous, and it could lead to another January 6th style of attack. And that is extremely alarming.
Right. And by the way, without a lot of the roadblocks that had been put in place to stop these efforts from going through the first time, we're seeing people like Brad Raffensperger, who had opposed this in Georgia, had his power stripped. Obviously, you did, and I'm going to ask you about that in just a moment. But a lot of the steps that had been, a lot of the barriers that had been put in place, the checks, have been dismantled by a Republican Party that seems more and more intent on pushing this big lie and really acting upon it. Not only this time, but in the future. I did want to ask, because you had mentioned about the machines being basically put out of commission. Because they're no longer in the county's custody, are these machines no longer safe to use? And if not, are you able to replace all of this equipment in time for the 2022 election cycle?
That's exactly right. And this is something that we notified the county about, that it was a grave concern we had if they lost custody of the equipment back in February and March, when this thing was first being contemplated. And this is not just our office. Our office is the authority that certifies the equipment in Arizona. But this came from CISA and their best practices and guidelines for election equipment, that if the chain of custody is lost by certified election officials and there's the potential that it was compromised, it should not be utilized in elections again. And so we're basing our notice to the county on that guidance. Even if the chain of custody had just gone from the county to the Cyber Ninjas, and nothing else happened, that would still be a problem. But what we know is that this equipment was locked in a room that nobody had access to, in terms of the expert observers, the press, the public cameras. None of that happened. And so we don't know what they did to the equipment. And without knowing that, and without having a way to verify if it's been compromised, then the safest thing is not to use it. So the contract for the equipment is with the county. It's going to be up to them to resolve that with their vendor, and help. And so, but the reason we sent this notice now is that we are already in preparations for the 2022 election. And this needs to happen sooner rather than later.
Is that a cost that the county has to bear now by virtue of having to replace this equipment? Or is it just up to the vendor to switch out bad equipment for equipment that you can then certify?
At the end of the day, I believe it's going to be the taxpayers of Arizona that bear this cost. There is some kind of written indemnification that the Senate provided to the county so that the county wasn't going to bear the cost of any harm. And so on the basis of that, it should be the Senate that is replacing the equipment. I don't know how that's going to be resolved, but it'll be the taxpayers that end up paying for that.
Okay, so going back to something that we touched on earlier, a bill is now passed the state House and Senate Appropriations Committee that would strip you of your election powers for committing the crime of criticizing the audit that we were just referring to. So what exactly would this bill do, and what are you doing to fight back?
So I want to make it clear, this bill is nothing more than political retaliation at me and my office for doing the job that the Arizona voters elected me to do, being good at that job. And it'll basically overturn the will of the voters, if they're successful. What they're doing is removing a constitutional duty of my office of defending of Arizona election laws and taking it and giving it to the Attorney General. So how that plays out, what that means is if somebody decides to file a suit over an election law, my office will still be the named defendant and won't have any ability to act as a defendant in court and have any say over the matter in court. And this is really problematic in many ways. I have had public conflicts with the Attorney General because I've tried to focus on what's best for voters of Arizona, and he's defended cases based on his partisan political agenda. And so that's really what this comes down to. This is unconstitutional. The duties prescribed to my office in this regard are in the state's constitution, and the legislature does not have the authority to overturn the Constitution. And so, if this does end up passing, we will go to court over it.
Also, this bill would end after 2022, so it literally just targets you. Nothing here is based in any semblance of governing principles. It is just a personal attack against someone who isn't deemed sufficiently loyal to this cause of defending the big lie.
Well, and I'll just, this didn't start with the 2020 election. It started with me being a Democrat and having the audacity to win a statewide race in Arizona.
Well, with that said, your term is up in 2022. So what's your plan? Are you going to run again for Secretary of State? Do you plan to run for higher office?
I have dealt with threats, having armed protesters at my house, and I haven't caved to their scare tactics. So I certainly am considering higher office. Arizonans I talk to are tired of this partisanship, and they want leaders who are going to roll up their sleeves and get to work. So no matter what office I run for, that's what I'm going to be focused on, not this noise, not the scare tactics. But if people want to learn more, they can go to katiehobbs.org.
Well, I'm sorry that you're going through that, but thank you for continuing to fight for what's right here. So Secretary Hobbs, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.